Before I do start this video, make sure to use my TCG player affiliate down below if you're looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. Also, this channel is sponsored by Arcane Fortress. If you're looking for the best deck boxes around, make sure to use my link down below in the description to check them out. One other way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron. There are some great benefits of being a patron to the channel, such as giveaways, deck advice, and more when you do join. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG. As you can tell, I've been putting a lot of deck text out for Bloomburrow specifically because it's a very cute and adorable set and there's a lot of legendary creatures. So to kind of continue the theme, I'm going to go over another commander of the series, and that's Kastral the Windcrested. So this one is quite possibly a really powerful bird commander, so let's read what it does. So for 3 white and a blue, it's a 4/5 body with flying. Whenever one or more birds you control deal combat damage to a player, choose one. You may put a bird creature card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Put a +1/+1 counter on each bird you control and draw a card. So what's very powerful about that is the fact that if you swing at 3 different people, you're going to get 3 different triggers. You're going to get maybe 3 1/1 counters on your creatures. You could draw 3 cards, or you could put 3 birds from your graveyard to the battlefield or from your hand. Obviously, you can get a mix of that if you want to choose one of those and then 2 of the other. You totally could do that, but obviously you have to get combat damage into your opponents. Luckily, what's very nice about birds though is the fact that they do have the evasion of flying, so there's a lot of ways we could get in for damage and get those triggers. So this one is pretty powerful and can be a really good bird commander in general sense. So with that said, I am going to talk about the game plan of the deck. I will follow up later on with birds and talk about the win cons of the deck too. And so without further ado, let's get it started. So now let's focus on the game plan of the deck. What are we trying to achieve? Of course, this is an aggressive strategy with a lot of birds, so cards like Reconnaissance Mission, Bident of Thassa, and Kindred Discovery is going to be excellent. Even though our commander does have some card draw, it's very important just to get a lot of card draw options because you don't want to just rely on your commander. Plus, if we're having a lot of evasive flyers on the battlefield, we might as well get some extra advantage by getting some extra card draw. Because this deck focuses on birds, Raise the Palisade is going to be an excellent choice for us. Choose a creature type, return all creatures that aren't of the chosen type to their owner's hand. So it's just a mini Cyclonic Rift for creatures. Obviously, you're going to have birds on the battlefield. It's very unlikely that a lot of people are going to have birds on the battlefield. I mean, if they have some kind of bird on the battlefield, oh well. We're going to overwhelm them with a lot more advantage having a lot of birds on the battlefield swinging in for victory. Our commander also deals with counters, so using cards like Nesting Grounds and Power Conduit is going to be vital. Whether we're putting 1/1 counters on the creatures we want to ship them around maybe, or because we have those finality counters from creatures we resurrected with our commander, we could just remove those and place them on another target permanent. At least that's with Nesting Grounds. Power Conduit is pretty good too. It takes those finality counters and replaces them with 1/1 counters. I mean, you could use charge counters, but most likely you want to use the 1/1 counters on your creatures. So each of these are pretty good in that aspect. Continuing the pattern of counters, I did want to focus on Goldberry River Daughter. I know it's technically not a bird, but it works so well with those counters. Her first ability reads, move a counter of each kind not on Goldberry River Daughter from another target permanent you control onto Goldberry. Then you can use the other tap ability later on, paying a blue and tap it, move a 1 or more counters from Goldberry onto another target permanent you control. If you do, you draw a card. So obviously you can choose to remove finality counters, put it on Goldberry. She will be vulnerable because if somebody removes it, it will get exiled. But if she doesn't get removed, you could just remove that counter and put it onto a land you control. A finality counter on a land is not going to be a big deal because most people aren't running land destruction. Also, you don't really have to focus on the finality counters. You can just remove a 1/1 counter from a creature and buff up another creature too. Plus on top of that, you get a card draw, so what's not to like about this card? Also, you want to make sure that you put cards into the graveyard like birds so that you could reanimate them later. Chart a Course, Frantic Search, and Change of Plans are some options that you could choose from. There's so many options that you can choose from in a general sense for blue color combinations. Chart a Course is pretty simple. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card unless you attack this turn. So you don't even have to attack. You could play the spell and then discard a bird card, then swing in with your commander, then reanimate that bird that you just discarded. The same can be said for Frantic Search. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, untap 3 lands. Then with Change of Plans for X, colorless, and a blue, each of X target creatures you control connive. You may have any number of them phase out, so this is a protection spell. Also, all creatures get to connive, where you could draw a card, then discard a card, and put a 1/1 counter on them. But now let's fly off to the next topic and talk about birds. After all, we're focusing on birds. There's a lot of bird options that we could take advantage of in the deck. The ones I did want to highlight first is Eziar Wardwing Familiar, also Thrumming Bird and Watcher of the Spheres. These are very low to the ground birds that are excellent at what they do. Eziar will protect our commander by giving our commander basically Ward 3. Thrumming Bird will proliferate on combat, which could buff up all our creatures that have 1/1 counters on them. Obviously, you don't probably want to use the finality counters and double them on a creature. Also, Watcher of the Spears will reduce the mana cost by 1 to all the creatures that we do have with flying in our hand, all the birds basically. Not only that, Watcher of the Spheres, depending on how much birds enter the battlefield, it can get extra big. Another bird I did want to highlight with counter synergy is Aven Courier with 1 and a blue for 1/1 body with flying. Whenever it does attack, choose a counter on a permanent you control, put that counter of the kind on target permanent you control if it doesn't have a counter of that kind on it. So that's just another way if a bird is left out of the party putting a 1/1 counter on it, we have that option with Aven Courier to put a 1/1 counter on another bird we control if we have one on our birds. Another card that's excellent in the deck is Aven Mimeomancer. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a feather counter on target creature. If you do, that creature has base power and toughness 3/1 and has flying as long as it has a feather counter on it. So most of our creatures are going to most likely be 1/1, so having that option of putting a feather counter on a creature, making it have 3 power instead of 1 power is going to be huge. There are some really good birds from Lord of the Rings that I did want to highlight, like Eagles of the North, Gwahir the Windlord, and Eagle of Deliverance. I mainly like Eagles of the North as a common, mainly because you could plane cycle it to get a land into your hand, and then later on you could swing in with your commander, return it back to the battlefield, so that by itself is pretty efficient. Gwahir the Windlord is pretty good for 4 white and a blue. This will cost 2 less as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn. Obviously that's going to happen more cases than not. It does have flying and vigilance, and other birds you control have vigilance. So that way, if you do swing in with your creatures, you don't have to worry about them being tapped because they will have vigilance. They can stay behind and block for the next turns. And Eagle of Deliverance is pretty good. It does have flying. It does enter the battlefield, put an indestructible counter on another target creature you control, draw a card if that creature's power is 2 or less. So most of our birds do have power 2 or less. Our commander doesn't, but most likely, I think you want to put the indestructible counter on your commander so that nobody removes it on the battlefield. One of the best birds that you could throw into the deck is none other than Ledger Shredder. This is incredible for 1 and a blue with a 1/3 body. It does have flying. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, Ledger Shredder connives, so you draw a card then discard a card, so you have that looting ability to put a creature card into the graveyard so that you can reanimate it later with your commander. That's a bird. Plus on top of that, you could buff it up as long as it was non-land card that was discarded. This card is such a value engine, especially for our deck when we want to put birds into our graveyard so that we can reanimate them later. This is going to be a powerhouse. From the plane of Ikoria, I did want to highlight Shabraz the Sky Shark and Skycat Sovereign. Shabraz is perfect for our deck because it's going to get bigger and bigger over time. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you gain 1 life. Plus, it is a bird shark, so technically it is a bird after all. And Skycat Sovereign, I wanted to put this in a deck for a long time. This might be it because it looks so cool. Even though technically it is not a bird itself, it does make 1/1 white cat bird creature tokens, and if you haven't seen those creature tokens, they're absolutely adorable. So this one is more of a token generator for us, making more and more birds on the battlefield for ourselves. Plus, all the while it buffs up itself further when you have more flying creatures on the battlefield. Let's take a look at some other birds that I did want to highlight, like Steel Plume Marshal and Kangi Sky Warden. Most likely we will have a huge army of flying birds, so having these options to buff them up is going to be incredible. Steel Plume Marshal, whenever it does attack other attacking creatures you control with flying, get +2/+2 until end of turn. So this fits very well with our aggressive attacking theme of getting combat damage. And with Kangi, whenever it does attack other attacking creatures with flying, get +2/+1 until end of turn, but whenever it does blocking creatures with flying, get +0/+2 until end of turn. Also forgot to mention this does have vigilance, so you can swing in, give all your creatures that buff, and then later on your opponent's turn, it can stay behind and also give your creatures +0/+2 until end of turn when it does block. So these are pretty good overall for buffing up our creatures. Let's dive into it even further. That is actually the main win con of the deck, is buffing up all our creatures, because we don't really need any other things besides swinging in and dealing a lot of combat damage, because that's what we're doing. We have a lot of evasion with flyers. So let's dive into it even further with Flowering of the White Tree, Gravitational Shift, and Eprian Eagle. Surprisingly, there is a lot of legendary creatures in our deck, so Flowering of the White Tree is going to be very good because legendary creatures you control get +2/+1 and have ward 1, so that protection and that buff is going to be very vital, especially with our commander. And if anything else, it's just going to buff up all our non-legendary creatures anyway, so it's going to be a win-win for us. Speaking of a win-win, Gravitational Shift is excellent. Creatures with flying get +2/+0, and creatures without flying get -2/-0. So that's great because we could buff up all our creatures, but we could also decrease the power of all our other opponent's creatures on the way. And the Empyrean Eagle is essentially just another anthem for all our flying creatures, so that's just a great overall card in the deck anyways. I did mention that there's a lot of legendaries in the deck, so War of the Last Alliance is going to be excellent. It's a great saga because for the first 2 lore chapters, we could search our library for a legendary creature and put it into our hand. Then for that last lore chapter, creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn. The ring tempts you, so that's very powerful. It could be game ending depending on how much birds we do have on the battlefield. I already named a decent amount of bird legendary creatures that we could take advantage of. We could draw into those with War of the Last Chaos Alliance by tutoring them, and then put them onto the battlefield, buff up our birds even further, then later on give them all double strike with that last lore chapter. This is going to be excellent. Another card I would like to highlight is Duelist Heritage that also focuses on double strike for 2 and a white. Whenever one or more creatures attack, you may have target attacking creature gain double strike until end of turn. The first thing you will notice is the fact that any creature attacking can get double strike. It's only one creature though. This can be very significant in the politicking aspect. If somebody has a big giant creature on the battlefield and it swings at another opponent, you can just go ahead and give it double strike because it is attacking. It doesn't limit it to your own creatures. Plus, double strike actually works very well with our commander because we focus on combat damage. Let's just say, for example, we swing in with one creature with double strike because of Duelist Heritage. Our commander will trigger on that first strike damage and then later on that double strike damage. So that way you don't have to just draw one card, you could draw 2 cards or reanimate 2 creatures or put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So that's why a card like True Conviction can be a game ender for our opponents. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. So going back to that example, say for example 3 different creatures are swinging at 3 different opponents. That first strike damage will hit and then that double strike damage will hit later on. You can potentially draw 6 cards or reanimate 6 creatures or put 6 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Obviously you can choose a mix of those abilities. You don't just have to draw 6 cards, you could draw 3 cards. Then later on you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control and then reanimate a creature in those instances. You don't have to worry about just only drawing 6 cards, only putting 6 1/1 counters on each creature you control, or reanimating 6 creatures. You could do a mix of those. So with all that said, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Kastral the Windcrested. This is one incredible bird commander. I feel like it's going to be the best bird commander that we have available to us. But I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.